Hi, this is Bill Ringle, host of My Quest for the Best, where we meet business, thought, and community leaders to discuss issues relevant to entrepreneurial growth. Joining us today is Joe Calloway. Joe is a business author, consultant, and speaker who served Coca-Cola, Verizon, and American Express, among other well-known corporations. He works with medical practices, law firms, and a range of professional service groups. Joe is the executive in residence at the Belmont University Center for Entrepreneurship. Joe Calloway is the author of Be the Best at What Matters Most and 5 other business books that have been well received by publications like the New York Times, Retailing Today, and Publishers Weekly. His latest book is Magnetic, The Art of Attracting Business. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, Bill, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Joe, when you were little, do you remember any influences on being an entrepreneur or opportunities you had that helped you see early on that you had a streak of being an entrepreneur?
I tell you what, I might have been an odd little kid, Bill, but I don't know what it was in me. My dad did not own his own business. He was a small-town banker, and so I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. But I remember, and I mean, I was little. This was maybe 3rd grade. I told my mother that I wanted to sell my toys. And so I set them all up on the front porch of our house. It was in the summer, and she thought I was just kind of playing store. And then I asked her to help me find the phone numbers of all my friends' homes so I could call them and have them come over with their parents and shop. And she realized I was serious. And she said, no, you're not going to sell your toys. But, you know, from an early age, I was either selling stuff or, oh, my gosh, I mowed 1,000,000 yards. I raked a trillion leaves off yards. And I think part of that came from my dad, who, although, I mean, he took great care of all 4 of us kids, but if there was something extra that I wanted and I mentioned it, he would say, that's great. How much money have you got saved up? And so I got it early on that I could pretty much have what I wanted if I was willing to go work and earn the money for it. And so that really, it kind of drove this work ethic in me that serves me to this day. I'm glad I've got it, although I do have to work on letting go and not working sometimes. That's a perpetual lesson for me.
Understood. It's important to learn how to harness that drive to serve you, but not that it drives you into the ground.
Exactly. Yeah, good point.
So how did you get started in business?
Well, you know what? It's funny. I didn't start off on a business path. I was very interested in politics. I graduated from college as a political science major. I worked in the Tennessee state legislature on the staff there for the Speaker of the House of Representatives. But then I got a little itchy. I wanted to do something different. And my brother-in-law was out in the state of Washington. I'm in Nashville, and I was in Nashville at the time. My brother-in-law was starting a small real estate firm, which I knew nothing about. But he said, come on out here and do it with me. And so I moved out to the state of Washington, got my real estate license, became the sales manager and the general manager. And as general manager, Bill, the way I got paid was based on how much all the agents made. I mean, it was based on the revenue generated by everybody in the firm. And that's where I got bit by the bug of what can I come up with or what can I pass along in terms of ideas that will help other people be more successful. Because the more successful they were, it had an absolute direct impact on my own income. So that's really kind of where I got my start speaking, was with our morning meetings with those real estate agents.
So do you remember a particular point, Joe, or a lesson that you kept coming back to that you found was really successful at helping them focus on what they needed to do and act on their highest priorities, or make sure that they were, doing things that led to business? Because you didn't have the training. You had to figure this out, but you've obviously had some success with it. So what was an idea when you think back on that? You say, wow, I'm so glad I came up with that idea or technique or tool.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because it's funny. People will say sometimes over my career, they've said, well, okay, what qualifies you to do this? And Bill, my honest answer has always been, I'm really good at paying attention. And that really was my technique, my method, which was for me to, and I do it to this day, my job is to study the marketplace and look for individuals and organizations, businesses, large and small, across the board, every kind of industry and profession and business you can imagine. And what I look for is quite simply this. Who are the ones that are the market leaders, that are successful and able to sustain that success, to stay successful year after year and build on it and grow it? And then I simply say, okay, what do they all have in common? What is it that top performers do that any of us could do if we just chose to? And so, I ought to be the poster boy for it's not rocket science, because I've not discovered anything complicated in terms of how businesses and how individuals succeed. It's all very simple, but that's not to say that it's easy. It's not easy to succeed in business, but it's not a mystery. I don't believe there are any secrets to success. I think the ideas that work are right out there in the open for all of us. So it's a matter of getting intentional about using those ideas and then doing the hard work necessary to execute on the ideas.
So it's through paying attention to what's working for others and then sharing that information. And you've now built a career out of sharing that information in a variety of channels as an author, a speaker, and a consultant. What are some of the things that are going on in people's minds? Let's take speaking, for instance, because you're well known in the speaking industry and some of the others. But when someone's thinking, I really want the people coming to this convention or sales meeting to get this message, what's going on in their minds where they say, we just have to get Joe Calloway. We just have to find him and make sure these dates line up. What is it that prompts them to call and reach out to you?
You know, there are a couple of things that I work at really hard and that have served me well. One is this is kind of interesting, Bill. I wrote a chapter about this in the new book, in Magnetic, and I didn't write it about speaking. I wrote it about anybody, any business, but it certainly applies to speaking, and I even talk about how it applies to me in that chapter. And it's the idea that I have to be relevant, which means, here's the thing, and I think we've all experienced this. You're sitting in an audience, and you're listening to a speaker, and you think, this is all well and good, and this is interesting on some level, but it doesn't really have anything to do with me. I don't really see how I can use what this guy or this gal is talking about. And that'll kill you in my business. So I have to stay relevant, which means I've got to stay current on what is working in the marketplace. And the other trick, and this ties into being relevant, is I work really hard at having a deep understanding of who's in my audience. I got up early this morning, which is nothing new. I get up really early every morning. But I've got a presentation on Thursday in Washington, D.C., and I was researching that company and that industry. So that now I'm not an industry expert for them. I'm definitely an outsider, but I'm going to make my presentation about them so that they go, I get it, and I can use what this guy is telling me. I see how I can use it beginning immediately. And so I really think that's the key, that you've got to keep your information current, and that goes for anybody, whatever their product or service is. It's got to be relevant to the marketplace. You can have what you think is the greatest idea in the world and be very passionate about it. But if other people don't want it, if they don't see the need for it, then you've got a hobby. You don't have a business. And so to me, it's about being relevant, I think, more than anything.
So I think everyone who is listening to this conversation has had the experience of being in a training meeting or presentation, and a speaker maybe they're sitting down as a group of salespeople or engineers, but then the speaker comes in and talks about how the airlines can't give good customer service. And they're all like, all right, we have to hear this again? Yeah. How do you transform? Give a specific example as to how you deliberately sidestep around the common stories and find things to help people get the point, because I think the principles are the same, but what makes them accessible is when they are specific and relevant. Give me an example maybe from some presentation that you've done or a conversation you had with a manager where your research allowed you to talk about specific relevant examples and topics.
I'm going to be speaking on Thursday to a very, very high-level construction company. I mean, these people build huge buildings. They build bridges. They're big. They have offices in about 50 countries around the world. I'm going to be speaking to the top 100 people in the company. And, Bill, I'm going to use an example from the food industry. But then I'm going to challenge it. And I'm going to say, I'm going to raise the exact objection that you just raised. Well, first I'm going to set the story up by saying, let's talk about something that happened with a restaurant. And then let's see what, if anything, that has to do with your business. So I'll tell the story, I'll make the points, and I'll say, one of the things that this restaurant has done is they have become exceedingly easy to do business with. Now, let me ask you, when you're dealing with a municipality, when you're dealing with a school system, when you're dealing with the government of another country, and you are competing on a bid on your construction project with other companies, you tell me, how much of a competitive advantage is it for you to be perceived as being the easiest to do business with? Well, I guarantee you everybody in the room is going to nod their head, and their response is going to be, it's a huge competitive advantage. And then I'll say, well, okay, let's think about it. And I will not try and tell them how to do what they do, because I can't. I'm not in that business. But I'll talk about the principle of how you look at the different aspects of your business and figure out how can we be easier to do business with for our customers, for our clients. So I think, it doesn't take much. And like I say, I'm not an expert on the construction business, so I can't pretend to be. That would just get me in trouble. But what I can do is help make the link between here's the principle, here's the illustration of it, and here's quite clearly what it has to do with you and your business. And I think an effective part of that, Bill, is I'm very frequently challenging my own material in terms of, is it relevant to them? So I'm kind of asking those unspoken questions that might be going through their heads. Because if I don't get buy-in on the ideas, then I've wasted my time, their time, and somebody's money.
So, Joe, I think that what you just did is really interesting because it gives everyone who is listening to this an idea that not just how you research and present, but during that interaction, you're teaching them to think, to position themselves in a more relevant position for strategic advantage. You're facilitating the development and probably evolution of their thinking as a group. It's not just telling stories. So that really is another aspect of what you're doing that you just highlighted that's incredibly valuable.
I perceive myself as being more of a facilitator than a speech maker because exactly as you just said, I want to facilitate their thinking in a way that's useful when they go back to work.
And, Joe, I think that a lot of that comes through in the book Magnetic, The Art of Attracting Business. What inspired you to write the book?
One thing and I work with a lot of smaller businesses, actually, and one thing that they all say, and it may not be their top priority, but it's something that we're all interested in, whether you're a one-person business or you're General Motors, which is how do I get customers, keep customers, and attract more customers? And there's been so much energy around, and rightfully so, around the Internet and people saying, well, how can I use social media to interact with my market? But the focus has been on what should I say on social media? And a big part of this book is about, and it's certainly not limited to social media at all, but it does address the whole subject of, it's not what you say about yourself that really matters much one way or another. It's what other people are saying about you. It's what your customers are saying about you, whether it's on Yelp, whether it's on TripAdvisor.com, whether it's on Facebook. Believe me, everybody is talking about who they do business with and whether they like them or don't like them. They're doing reviews constantly. It may not be a formal review, but they're talking about companies and professionals and businesses that they like, and they're doing it online. And so certainly you want to participate on social media and you want to be on there. But my biggest energy isn't about what I post on social media. It's about being intentional about creating a customer experience that is so compelling that my customers are saying things that drive new business to me. And so it's interesting that the biggest force in being magnetic is actually positive word of mouth. And a lot of this book is about how to get yourself and everyone in your organization really focused on creating positive word of mouth that will serve to attract new customers to you.
Joe, I'd love to hear an example of how a customer of yours or a client of yours has done this, or maybe how you've helped another small business develop positive word of mouth. Because we've all seen plenty of examples of people just spraying information out on the Internet, which is better than not, well, in some cases, it's better than not being visible at all, but it certainly takes it to another level to say my intention is to generate positive word of mouth. What are some of the thinking and steps behind that?
Yeah, I could give you a handful of examples. Let me give you one that's a client of mine that I really, really like, and they're in a business. Well, they've got an interesting approach to their business. The name of the company is Western Waterworks Supply Company. They're out in California, and they help contractors, or they supply contractors who do big water projects like drainage for parking lots, and I'm talking about big underground pipe systems and that sort of thing. And so they sell all of this water control equipment. And what they've done is they've staked their claim on this. We will be the market leader, and we will continue to expand our market because our customers will tell other potential customers how incredibly happy they are with us. And so here's what they've done, and I talk about this in the book. As a matter of fact, Bill, I've got them as an example in the book. What Western Waterworks has done is they've said, what are the handful of things that are truly most important to our customers? And if we deliver, if we are consistently excellent on these just 3 or 4 things every time with every customer, with every job, then the word of mouth about us will be so overwhelmingly positive that we will attract new customers like a magnet. They've done it, and they've done it very successfully. Another example, Old Dominion Freight Line, which if you go on their website, you look at the testimonials from their customers, and you look at the awards that they've won in the industry, and these are primarily awards that are voted on by customer companies. And so their strategy was, we're going to pick 3 things, we're going to dominate on those 3 basic things, and through that, our customers will generate such positive word of mouth that we will grow year after year. It's the most grounded, powerful selling marketing strategy that there is. And of course, it may be appropriate for you to advertise, for you to have a marketing and PR program, but I'm telling you, nothing is more powerful. The single greatest competitive advantage out there is satisfied customers. And that idea and how to make that real is a lot of what the book is about.
In Magnetic, you also talk about having a magnetic mindset, and there are 3 beliefs that you bring out. One of them is that you believe your competition is really good already at what they do, and they're always gaining on you, even or have passed you. A second is that you don't apologize to customers because you don't do things that they have to apologize for. And third is that you say no to a lot of potential customers in business.
Right.
When you talk about not apologizing to customers, you mentioned an example from your own business where you had shipped a large number of books to a meeting where you were speaking. Can you tell us about how that worked and how you actually put your principle into action, even at your own cost, when that occurred?
Yeah, and by the way, and I certainly say in the book, I say don't apologize to customers, which of course it's like, what? What's he saying? And it's exactly what I say. I know. What I say in the book is I don't apologize to customers because I don't do things I have to apologize for. And I then immediately admit that is an aspirational statement, meaning, of course, every now and then I'm going to mess up. But my focus, here's the thing, there are a lot of businesses that find themselves apologizing frequently to customers. Well, hello, that's a clue that you need to back up and solve whatever's causing you to have to apologize. In the specific example that you cite, which was a company I was going to speak to ordered 600 books for everybody attending the convention. I get to the convention, the customer is understandably very upset. We shipped the wrong book. And so, first of all, of course, I said, I'm sorry. But then, way more important than that, and this is my philosophy, you so overwhelm them with solution that the problem is not only wiped away, but you actually come out on the other side having gained in that positive, in making the relationship positive. What I did was I said, well, number one, keep these books, and there's no charge for them. Number two, give me the name and address of everybody here, and I will ship to them at my cost the right book at no cost to anybody. Or I'll ship all the copies to your central, headquarters, and you can send them to everybody. And now, this was a solution that would have cost me tens of thousands of dollars. What the client ultimately said was, you know what, just having the book that you sent us, which actually looks like a great book, and not charging us for that, that's fine. And then I went on to do a very good job with the presentation itself. And so they felt great about that. The point, though, is this. You don't argue with the customer. You make it right, and you make it right so overwhelmingly that they go, okay, you just knocked my socks off. I'm going to talk about this. And it's a cost, but I look at that cost as an investment. And the return on that investment can be pretty high.
Right, and not only is the return high, but they also know that you just modeled taking responsibility for an error. It wasn't you blamed it on a vendor or blamed it on a team member. It was, you know what, the wrong books, the books that I said were going to show up are not here. Another book showed up, and here's what we're going to do about it.
Yeah. They couldn't care less if it's not my fault. All they know is they got the wrong book. And it would be pointless for me to say, oh, well, here's why this happened and it wasn't my fault. Nope, it's my responsibility, it's my company, I'm going to make it right. And I mean, I don't see any other way. I don't see any other logical way or way that makes sense as a business to approach a situation like that. You used exactly the right word. You've got to take responsibility.
So in a book about attracting more business, you spend quite a bit of attention on saying no to customers, saying no to the wrong customers, and helping companies think about how to develop an evaluation system so that they're choosing the right customers. Because why is it that we have so many customers or companies today operating, and they're just taking business from anyone who walks in and self-qualifies rather than having a proper evaluation system so that you're only working with people who you could do a great job for and will become, like you've mentioned, outstanding advocates and referrers of other business. Tell me a little bit more about how that works and why it's important from your perspective.
a quote that I absolutely love. As a matter of fact, it may be my favorite quote that for the last few years. Warren Buffett, of course, the financial super wizard of our time. Warren Buffett once said this, and think about it. He said the difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. Now, that catches a lot of people by surprise, but here's what he means. Very successful people are extremely focused on those things, those activities, those investments, those customers that create the greatest return. And there are some customers, and everybody listening to this conversation can relate to this. There are some customers that actually create a negative return. And the idea that any business is good business is just flat wrong. And so what I talk about in the book, and I mean everybody needs to come up with their own kind of filter system, but for me it's on two levels. And one level is the actual literal business filter, which is, this morning, Bill, I sent an email to someone and said, hey, there's a company that's talking with me about doing some work with them, and I could do it, but I'm really not the perfect fit. And so I think this is more what you do, and if you agree, why don't I put you in touch with them and you take that job? I could have taken the job. I could have taken the money, but it's not really what I do. It's not my core business. And over the years, little by little, I've learned that it makes me a lot of money over the long haul to stick with what I do best and then let other people do what they do best. The other part of the filter, Bill, is very personal, and maybe part of it's just age. Maybe I've gotten to the age where my tolerance level for jerks is really low. And I'm simply not going to work with people that are an emotional drain. And again, everybody listening to this conversation is thinking of people that they've worked with that fit that description. That it's just, life is too short. And so I've gotten pretty good. And for me, one warning sign is people that are just wound so tight about the project, and they say, well, Joe, you better bring your A game, and Joe, you better jump through hoops, and Joe, and it's like, come on, I always bring my A game. It's the only way I can stay in business. But you are wound a little too tight, and I don't want to hang out with you. I don't say that to them. I find a polite way to decline the business. But that's hard to do, particularly when you're starting out. But I think it serves people really well to say no more often, because it actually creates opportunity for the right things.
So when you learn this idea, and maybe Buffett's quote helped crystallize it for you, maybe it stimulated you thinking about this more deeply, do you remember the first time that you said no to something that you would have said yes to? How did it make you feel, and what was the result?
It was, and this was unusual, Bill, because it was a job that was already booked. And I was on a conference call with the client. And when I say job, I mean it was a speaking engagement. I was going to come in and speak to the first-line managers for a company. And I was on a conference call with about 8 of their people. And I was talking. They said, well, okay, tell us about your presentation. And I got to the part where I was talking about making right decisions and using your own creativity to help create growth and create good customer relations. They interrupted me and said, Joe, we don't want them to think, and we don't want them to be creative. We don't want them to make any decisions on their own. We want them to do what they're told, and that's the message that we need you to help them buy into. Well, their philosophy was so in conflict with my philosophy that I said, I know we've already got a contract, but I am not the right speaker for you. And they said, well, can't you change your presentation? I said, I can certainly change my presentation, but I can't change what I basically believe works. And we are just too much in opposition. And I'm not saying that to say I'm right and you're wrong. I'm just saying we disagree. And Bill, they got angry. You signed this contract. And I finally convinced him. I said, look, let's all be professional here. I'm not the right fit. I can help you find the right fit, but I'm not it. And so they went away not thrilled with me, but I guarantee you if I'd taken that job, I would have looked at it on my calendar for the next few weeks, and I would have dreaded it, which would have been a drain to me and would have been counterproductive, and I would not have done a great job for them. So, yeah, that's the first really clear example of when it hit me, Joe, walk away from this. Nothing good can come from this. And even though it's money, it's not good money.
Kind of like when you're watching a movie and the music that the bad guys are coming starts coming on, you just have that sense in the background on a call, because in the call that you described, they were doing exactly what they were doing to their employees. They were saying, no, you're bringing fresh thinking to this, and we want you to do exactly what we're telling you to do, not enlighten us, not share any new ideas or anything that could change or upset what's going on. And your intuition rushed to the surface.
You make a great point that I'd never thought of, Bill. They were doing to me what they do with their employees. You're exactly right. And it's funny, thinking back, I think that bad guy music actually did start to play in the background.
So in the book, another really interesting case study that you bring out is in the chapter on the whole new ballgame. Can you give us a couple ideas about from where that comes from, and what are some of the differences that highlight when a company makes a profound shift because what they're doing isn't working, and what they do to change that involves small steps with really large impact and ripple effects down the road?
Well, the whole new ballgame, I think you're referring to the St. Paul Saints. Am I right?
That's right.
Yeah. The St. Paul Saints is a minor league baseball team in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'd heard about them for years, and I was so curious that I got on a plane, went up there. Here's the thing. It's a minor league baseball team, so they are in the business of baseball. Now, those of you that go to professional sporting events on darn near any level know that there's more going on than the game. Everybody's doing things to try to be entertaining. But the St. Paul Saints have quite literally redefined the whole concept of what it means to go to the baseball park. They are in the business not just of entertaining people. They are in the business of making people feel better. They're a little like Disney, Bill. They're in the business of making people happy. It's funny, one of the owners of the ball team is Bill Murray, the actor Bill Murray. And he was there the night that I was there. And the audience goes crazy. Bill goes out on the ball field sometimes. Sometimes when he's there, he'll actually be taking tickets from people. But that kind of embodies the spirit of the entire organization. The owner is a guy named Mike Veck, that baseball fans will hearken back to his father, Bill Veck, who was president of the Cubs many, many years ago. But the ideas I came away from was, one, break down the limits. Think about the business that you're in and try and redefine it on a bigger scale, on a larger scale. Number two, and this was a huge lesson, and I actually talked with Mike Beck the night of that game, and he said, Joe, I don't do anything. I hire great people, and I get out of their way. Kind of the opposite of that bad guy client that I was just talking about. Bill is a huge believer in, if you hire the right people, you can totally turn them loose as long as they understand the direction that the business is going, and you'll be successful. And his third idea is quite simply this. He even wrote a book with this title, Fun is Good. And you know what? I don't care what business you're in. Bill, I'm going to the dentist tomorrow morning, and I love my dentist, and I love everybody there. Not that it's always fun, but I always feel good when I see them, when I go in there. I even feel good when I leave there, no matter what they do to me, because they understand that it's more than medicine. It's more than healthcare. It's certainly more than a business transaction. It's a relationship, and if their patients walk away feeling better, not just physically, but mentally, that's smart business. So it's funny, Bill, there are examples that we can all learn from everywhere if we just pay attention.
Joe, a lot of times businesses think, well, we've been in this industry forever. It's a mature business. There's nothing new about it. You may even think of like Michael Scott in a paper company on The Office, the TV series. There's nothing new in that business. The same could be said for something like baseball, but what really made me laugh out loud when I was reading about it was how they have baseballs delivered to the umpire by teaching a trained pig to trot it out. That is just hilarious. Yeah,
every year they hire a new pig, and they put a little satchel on him like you would put across a motorcycle that you can carry stuff in. They put a satchel across him, and every year at the start of the game, the pig goes out and delivers the baseballs to the umpires. And since it's a different pig every year, he's got a different name every year. And this year's pig is Pegaso. They have fun with everything they do. And you may not be able to be goofy, but let me tell you something. If people like doing business with you, I mean, if it's industrial B2B, if people like doing business with you, that is a competitive advantage. And the more you see as your business being a commodity, the more that intangible of the quality of the relationship comes into play as a potential tiebreaker. So, yeah, it's a good lesson. I don't care who you are.
One of the other things that you talk about is simplifying your business. Is there a way of a company that you think of that has simplified their business in a way where it isn't just getting rid of underperforming SKUs or possibly even business units, but what's an example of simplifying that actually strengthens the business?
I'll go back to a company that I mentioned a few minutes ago, Old Dominion Freight Line. This is an international company. You've probably seen, the people listening right now, you've seen their trucks on the road. They're very successful trucking company, Freight Line. Now, a freight line is like a jigsaw puzzle with 10,000 moving pieces. The logistics can be overwhelming. You could think of it as being an extremely complicated business. Listen to this. Here's what they've done. If you ask anybody in that company, if you say, okay, what is it that you guys try to do every day? Here's the answer. And I love this because there's not a word of corporate speak in it. Number one, pick it up when you said you would. Number two, deliver it when you said you would. Number three, deliver it intact and all there. And so what they've done is they've taken a very complicated business that still has all the moving parts, but in their minds, they've gone, wait, we don't have 1,000 things to do every day. We've got 3 things to do every day. And if we win on those 3 things, and we are constantly innovating and improving on those 3 things, which are the 3 things that matter most to our customers, then we will win in the marketplace. And they do. And so, it's funny. I find that, and I'm the world's worst. I overthink everything. And here's a question I ask people a lot. I'll pose it to all the listeners right now. How many of you can relate to this? How many of you have this thought occasionally? I think I'm making this way more complicated than it needs to be. And I would guess that all of us are shaking our heads, yes. I certainly do it. And so I've gotten a lot better at thinking to myself, Joe, you're putting too many moving parts into this. Simplify it. Steve Jobs said, of Apple, said, if you can make things simple, you can move mountains. And that's one of the great strengths of Apple. It was a strength of Jobs, and it's still a strength of Apple, is they take the complicated and make it simple. And I think we can all do that, no matter what our business is.
And I think the opposite of that leads to companies acquiring the disease that you talk about in the book of the loss of their mojo, their magnetic mojo. Circuit City was cited as an example, and that's probably one of the things that led to their downfall. What's your perspective on what led to their difficulties?
Well, there's a couple of things that can cause you to lose your magnetic mojo. And one, and the biggest mistake that Circuit City made was they decided, and here's a fascinating thing, Circuit City, Bill, was one of the companies in Good to Great, which it's a great book, but Circuit City did everything to take them from good to great. But the problem is then they thought, we're great, we can stop. We never have to change again. We can do it the way we've always done it. And companies like Best Buy and Amazon just passed them and left them bankrupt, left them out of business. And so one mistake is to simply get complacent, and we all know that. Here's another mistake, though. And I'm not saying don't diversify. Diversification might be the absolute smartest thing for you to do. But one mistake a trap that's easy to fall into is to say, we could also do this, and we can also do that, and we can also offer this service, and we can also offer those products, which might be the right thing to do. But we often stretch ourselves way beyond where we should be in terms of trying to do too many things. Now, there's nothing wrong with trying new things out and testing them. But I'll tell you something, Bill, for every new idea that I get of something else that I can do, for every 10 of them that I test, 9 of them the market says, no, I don't think so. And that's okay. That's fine. That's useful information. But people sometimes stake too much of their energy and sometimes their money and their time into an idea thinking, well, I love it and I'm passionate about it, so everybody else is going to love it too. No, not necessarily. In spite of your friends saying, oh, that's a great idea, you ought to do it, just like my friends tell me. Sometimes the market says, Joe, I think it's a good idea, but not so good that I'm willing to write you a check for it. And so, again, the message is stay focused. And it doesn't mean don't change. God, you have to change to stay relevant. You have to improve. You have to innovate. But you've always got to create value in the eyes of the customers. Otherwise, it won't work.
And one of the implications of doing that is something that you write about in the book that Mark Sambor did when he fired a client. Can you share that story and the insight behind it that leads a business owner to say, you know what, things have changed and I can no longer serve you well?
Well, yeah, and I think, Mark's got a great story about that. And I think we all, that kind of goes back to that idea of saying no to business. But we all need to periodically sit down either with ourselves or with our team and say, hey, where are we spending way, way, way too much energy? And you can do that specifically with your customers or with a market segment. You can say, we're selling this product, but it's taken us so much time and energy to make it work that it's time and energy that could be better spent on something that would give us a greater return on that time and energy. So I think it's really smart to do an inventory, and sometimes you do, as Mark did. You need to fire a client or fire a customer or say, you know what, it would be the smartest thing for us to no longer serve this market segment. I mean, I've done that over the years. There are things that I was doing that I thought, by some measurements, this is working because it's creating revenue, but it's taking mind share of mine away from these other things that create far greater revenue for less expenditure of time, effort, and or money. So I think it's important for us to step back and to the greatest extent possible look at our own business with a critical, objective eye. And that's not easy to do, but I think you and your team need to do that, and you need to do it regularly.
And part of what you do, Joe, is you really focus on a lot of different industries, and you're thinking about a lot of different client organizations. What are some of the daily rituals you have that help you stay on track and productive?
Well, it's interesting. I'm very diversified in terms of client base because, I work with every kind of company imaginable, but I'm very narrowly focused on what I sell. what I take to that market. It's a general client base, but it's in a focused area of expertise and ideas that I work with. But as far as daily rituals, and I really do kind of have a pretty regular daily ritual that I follow. One is, Bill, I get up really early. This morning, it's Martin Luther King Day, or it could be any holiday. It could be the 4th of July, and it doesn't matter. I'm not going to sleep late. Maybe it's because I grew up on a dairy farm. But I got up this morning at 4:15. I just woke up. I felt good. My mind started to spin. And actually, now my regular time to get up is 5 a.m., but I love that time of day. Number one, it's when I'm most creative. Some people are most creative at midnight. I'm not. I'm most creative at 5 a.m. So that's when I do. This morning at 5 a.m., I was working on the presentation I'm going to do on Thursday because I know my own rhythms and when I'm most productive. The other thing that I do in that early morning time is I get focused, and I quite literally go to a file on my computer, open it up, and every day I type in, okay, what am I going to focus on today? What's most important for me today? And it tends to be in the same general area, but I might be specific about, a particular project I'm working on. And I think for people, for individuals, as well as for companies, you have to work at constantly being sure that you and everyone else are focused on what is most important. My last book was called Be the Best at What Matters Most. And I think that process of figuring out what matters most is very important, and to come back to it every single day and be sure that you're staying on track.
Well, Joe, you've shared so many great ideas with us today. Up front, you talked about how it's really important to work on what you're good at, and clearly you've demonstrated how you're really good at paying attention in both ways that are broad as well as ways that are specific to help managers and leaders of companies move forward. You've talked about how it's not rocket science, but it's simple things that need to be done that aren't easy, but once you get them right and you start by being intentional and focusing on those, it starts a processional effect that leads to success step by step, and you develop momentum about it. Part of what falls into that is the importance of recognizing that it's not what you say about yourself that matters as much as what others are saying about you, and the need to pay attention to what happens in social media in those ways. And the kinds of tips that you gave us with ways to gain competitive advantage, from having satisfied customers to making sure that people like doing business with you. And having fun is a great aspect to examine, because it really often doesn't require an investment of time or capital, but just to change the relationship to make it more fun and more enjoyable. You talked about making sure that you are always staying involved with the customer, and you want to be able to have that relationship and own that relationship so that you don't lose things like your magnetic mojo. Your magnetic mojo is important in order to continue to attract and retain customers, and you can't stay complacent with that. And you gave us some great reminders in that area. And then with daily rituals, you talked about the importance of making sure you find out when you can be at your best, and then focus on the things that are hardest to do during that time so you can give it your best energy and attention. So, Joe Calloway, you've shared some great ideas with us. Thank you so much for joining me on my quest for the best.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Bill. Thanks for having me on.